expected operating maintenance and debt service. So it's sort of universal that with the inclusion of a parking improvement, specifically a parking structure, that it really is going to rely on other revenues.
I get that. But my actual question is, why are
I'm going to get to it. So so yes, we have recommended that the authority continue to evaluate its contract parking and its off-street parking rates on a more periodic basis. It was last year or the year before?
May 2016 went from 57
right.
to 65.
So we started. We recommended to the authority and the authority board that it at least initiate that increase, and our recommendation every 2 or 3 years it should be evaluated, and rates should be adjusted. So it's a work in progress, but it's not. We don't. Our recommendation is that it shouldn't not continue moving forward, but we've just. The authority just implemented that rate increase on the contract.
You're
parking.
saying every 2 to 3 years. It was 2 years ago, and
I'm trying to answer the question.
Right.
So here we are, 2 to 3 years. So next year potentially, the authority, if it comes to ask our opinion, it will be that it evaluate its monthly contract parking and make adjustments.
Well, I strongly urge that we evaluate that now, because what we're doing is we're subsidizing larger people who asked for this garage to be built on the backs of the small businesses who are trying to attract people downtown. I think that should be an enormous part of how we generate revenues. If the garages are not self-financing, then we need to look closely at who's using the garages and why are we not asking them to pay their fair share instead of putting it on the backs of the people who live in the city. I think this should be done now, and I think this should be part of this recommendation right now, and I hope Mayor, that you will consider that as another and more equitable source of revenue for what we're trying to do, which is build another parking garage for a few users. I think that the people who are going to be using these garages, the larger businesses, really need to have some skin in the game, and the first step is actually asking them to pay the market value for what they're using. So that's what I would ask. The second question I wanted to ask is, was brought up by Mr. Shire. Why are we paid for variable rate meters? We have the technology available to us. And I don't want to lecture you certainly, but for the people in the room who didn't pick it all up, variable rate meters are when you see parking as a commodity, and if you have too much parking availability in one spot, you lower the rate so that you get a target occupancy level, and if you have too much competition in one spot, you raise the rates so that you have a target occupancy level. And what it creates is an efficient parking system, because by applying a flat rate increase, you're penalizing places by increasing the meter rates when actually we should be dropping them to get more people to come into town. So if we paid for this and it creates efficiencies, it's used in San Francisco. I read this entire fat book so I could understand how it works. Why are you not recommending that as an efficiency in the system?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge you have with congestion pricing, which I think maybe people have a better handle on, is that we also have to consider and analyze the impact it has on those sectors that are faced with higher rates. And I think that was probably the most challenging aspect of congestion or variable rate pricing, is that the hearts of the south side and the north side then would be further penalized, I think, which is a lot of folks maybe comment tonight, is that we're sort of penalizing the visitor, penalizing the user by raising rates. Well, in variable rate congestion pricing, that might be perceived even further. Whether it's reality or not, it's the perception is during the peak period where everybody wants to come to those, the 100% blocks, the rate now will not be $1 or $1.50, it could be $2 or $3. Are we defeating what we're trying to accomplish? So we just didn't think there was enough disparity of demand, and that in conjunction with the availability in the proximate off-street facilities led us to the recommendation that we have tonight.
Because I read all of the occupancy rates for the different streets, and there are very few that have over 80%. Those are the few, very, very few streets that would suffer penalty for demand rate parking. The majority of the streets actually would incur lower rates. If we were to target, instead of targeting a flat fee, we're targeting a percentage occupancy, most of these streets would have a drop in rates. So I think you would have a drop in revenue, and I'm suspicious that that may be in part why it wasn't actually suggested, because this is how all efficient cities nowadays price their parking. It's on occupancy levels, not on a flat rate fee. So I would encourage that we take a longer look at this, because I do agree with Mr. Haynes that if we increase the rates of our fees, our fines, to at least 20 bucks a ticket, it would more than offset the marginal decrease in parking rates, parking meter revenue that you're going to get by invoking variable rate pricing. And it is in a way saying exactly what Mr. Haynes is saying, is we need to stop putting up impediments to drawing people downtown. Most of the places where we have parking are underutilized, and therefore we should be dropping the rates to encourage the target occupancy rate, if it's say 80%, right? I think there's a lot better ways to find money for this parking system than putting it on the backs of the small businesses and the people who use the downtowns the most. And I would encourage us to look at that a lot closer. And I really did like your suggestion for the free parking as well. I think that we are a progressive city, and I think we have that ability to take longer looks at what we're really trying to accomplish here. I would suggest, my suggestion was, before I heard Mr. Haynes, which in essence is honestly what I'm saying, is that we should give away 2 hours of free parking in our parking garages for transient parkers, so that people would want to come down and use our downtowns and get comfortable with the garage. I think it's a really good idea, because the stronger our downtowns are and the stronger our businesses who work in the downtowns, you know, the better our whole community is going to be, and that's what the whole purpose of the BPA is. I also wanted to ask Kevin, is there anybody from the BPA board here tonight?
No.
I'm kind of shocked at that, I have to tell you. I think this is a huge deal. It's a big deal, particularly with our small business community. And I'm just surprised that they don't want to hear what we have to say here. I think there's some really good ideas, there's some really good dialogue, there's some good explanations of, of things we didn't understand. I would hope and encourage that whoever the mayor is appointing to the BPA board wants to have some knowledge of what everybody is struggling with here. It affects everyone deeply, and I would think that that would be a big part of being on the board.
I completely understand, and we do discuss everything publicly, and they did discuss this in a public meeting, and as I've said many times, I welcome everybody to come to the Parking Authority board meetings. They're 4 o'clock on the 4th Wednesday of every month. Everything is on the agenda, and I think that's the opportunity that everybody here would have to go and address the board in the public setting and ask them and ask them questions.
Honestly, this is...
I'm just saying that
okay.
I understand your point.
Not good,
but on the
Kevin.
other end, that we have
Not
public
good.
meetings the fourth weekend.
I know, but this is a public meeting about parking meter rate increases, and this is a big deal, and I would have expected them to be...
I'm providing the information so people can come, and I welcome more. The meetings aren't attended at all. Nobody comes to the parking authority.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. I really think we should have our public meetings after 5 o'clock so that people can come. I think they should be here in City Hall, not in a garage over on North Street, and I think they should be filmed so that people who can't come downtown can actually witness them for all public meetings for the city of Bethlehem. That's my proposition, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. The final thing is the purpose of this public meeting, it's not just perfunctory. It's not just we can sit here and see what you've recommended and we have to go home and say, well, that's how it's going to be. I hope the purpose of this public meeting is legitimately to hear alternative ideas, alternative propositions, because I think, as you've heard here, at least from half the people from all the people who've spoken, it's only half the room, there's a lot of real concern about how this meter rate increase is going to impact our small businesses and the economic viability of our downtown. So I urge you to please keep an open mind. Please consider some of the other ideas that you've heard here tonight, particularly decreasing the rate of parking and increasing the meter rate so that we can help our businesses, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in this center section? Right section?
I feel a little guilty for stealing your thunder.
I'm also Bruce Haynes, 825 Barnesdale Road in Bethlehem, and I have also had the privilege to work on Main Street for the last 23 years. It doesn't feel like a day over 30, but that's a joke. I usually use that for how many years I've been married, but it's a better laugh. Anyway, so I also serve on the DBA board, and as Bruce mentioned, Kevin came to us a while ago to talk about this, and I do have several concerns, most of which have already been mentioned, but from the small business person's perspective on Main Street, I feel obligated to speak. First of all, there's no debate, I think, among any of us who are thinking human beings that traditional retail, and by that I mean brick and mortar retail on a downtown Main Street, is struggling. Across the country, it's not just in the Northeast Corridor. And if you think about the businesses we have on Main Street, there are relatively few of what I consider to be traditional retailers